Last night, Trump was at it again with another executive order. I love this man for the way that he just turns around and goes, I'm going to do some analysis. And he comes out and goes, right, here we go. I'm going to issue a ban on several countries across the globe. No one from that country is going to get a visa. No one is allowed to come into that country. And then he gives a second tier where some of you might be allowed to come into this country, and some of you may get visas if I feel like it tomorrow morning, if I've got a nice good breakfast, or you might just change your rules. But I just love the fact that what he's done again is, having gone for his first term, where he got hammered consistently, right up to about 2017, about what was called the global Muslim ban, where he just said all these countries, if you're Muslims, you can't come in. He's kind of learned from that and said, we're coming back in once more, and we're going to start it all over again. And so what you've got here is, this is how he frames it last night: we don't want them. It's a brilliant line within it. So here he is giving the executive order. I'll let the people listen to it. Some of it may already have listened to it, others not. But I just think he's pretty emphatic, and he's quite dominant in this. And it's really interesting the way he just stares at camera and says, we don't want them.
Recent terror attack in Boulder, Colorado, has underscored the extreme dangers posed to our country by the entry of foreign nationals who are not properly vetted, as well as those who come here as temporary visitors and overstay their visas. We don't want them. In the 21st century, we've seen one terror attack after another carried out by foreign visa overstayers from dangerous places all over the world. And thanks to Biden's open door policies, today there are millions and millions of these illegals who should not be in our country. In my first term, my powerful travel restrictions were one of our most successful policies, and they were a key part of preventing major foreign terror attacks on American soil. We will not let what happened in Europe happen to America. That's why on my first day back in office, I directed the Secretary of State to perform.
So I'm going to stop there because I want to carry on a little bit. I mean, I just want to look at that. First, he's making reference back to 2017. Look, guys, we didn't have any terrorist attacks in the way that Europe has got it. We're not going to let what happened in Europe. And why is Europe doing that? Because you're just allowing millions and millions of terrorists come into your country. Now, not everybody who comes from a foreign country is a terrorist. We know that. It is a minority. But the point at issue is, he's making it very clear we're not going to allow the kind of policies that we have in Europe to come here. And do we think that is sensible?
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, just
reducing crime, yeah, it's sensible. Yeah.
It does. Not allowing terrorist acts seems good enough.
Was it
Simon
a trap
Reeves
question?
Of the BBC.
No, I was just trying to get the reaction as to turn around and say,
Simon Reeves of the BBC might have some strong questions about that, Stelios.
Why do you think that there might be terrorist actions in your country from foreign countries? Because they are just doing that. Now, and so I think it's really interesting that the way he looks at this, he references Europe, he references the past, but he also references the recent terror attack where they had someone who overstayed their visa and then tried to petrol bomb a whole load of Jews who were having a demonstration, really a kind of reminiscence of what Hamas was doing into their country. And then we find out that his wife and his family were also overstayers on a tourist visa. Now, I haven't got the clips of it, but some of your audience may pick it up. But ICE were at their doors last night. That's the organization that removes people and deports them in America. They were at the door last night, and they're already putting them on a plane. Just off you go. Your husband was a terrorist, love. I'm sorry, you might have been overstaying your visa here to come on holiday or study, but all of you are going. So he's sending out a very powerful message about deportations, in removing people, and that he's going to enhance his game even more strongly than it has been in the past. And then he goes on to here.
Form a security review of high-risk regions and make recommendations for where restrictions should be imposed. Among the national security threats their analysis considered are the large-scale presence of terrorists, failure to cooperate on visa security, inability to verify travelers' identities, inadequate record keeping of criminal histories, and persistently high rates of illegal visa overstays and other things. Very simply, we cannot have open migration from any country where we cannot safely and reliably vet and screen those who seek to enter the United States. That is why today I am signing a new executive order placing travel restrictions on countries including Yemen, Somalia, Haiti, Libya, and numerous others. The strength of the restrictions we're applying depends on the severity of the threat posed. The list is subject to revision based on whether material improvements are made, and likewise, new countries can be added as threats emerge around the world. But we will not allow people to enter our country who wish to do us harm, and nothing will stop us from keeping America safe. Thank you very much.
So this is sending out a total message to the liberal left in his country and also into Europe. You've got not only a man in charge that turn around and are going to defend the borders in the south. I'm not only going to increase deportation, I'm going to look at you as countries across the globe and say, you too are failing in, and he lists completely what they're doing. You're sending people, you're not doing visa checks. We don't know what you're coming. You're not linking in with ourselves. So we don't know who you're sending over to us. It also follows on from this. He also attacked the universities and said he's restricting the numbers of people from those countries also coming to universities in Harvard and Yale and Columbia and others. So he's making a very, very clear determination. It's not just our policies over here. We're now addressing your policies. You get your systems up to place. You prove that your systems work. And if you can, then we might look at allowing you to come into this country at all. But there's also a very clever part that we're considering on that.
I have a question on this because it sounded like, maybe I completely misunderstood, but maybe it sounded like you are describing it as Trump signing that executive order and issuing it in order to address the policies of these countries. Whereas in fact, it seems more like, he's trying to exercise political pressure.
He's doing both. I mean, quite frankly, he is actually exerting political pressure here in the UK, but also onto those countries by saying to them, look, here is our country, here is our border. When we ask you to give us visa details about them, you're not giving it.
Yes.
And you're actually allowing people through that we think are terrorists or willing to overstay. And he's saying that's a very interesting point for people. Overstaying, I think, is the next question that this government and the United States is going to go for. And considering we have about 1 million people overstaying in the UK, I wish we could do exactly the same. So I think he's lining that up. And there's
So just to get on the same page, the implication of what you were saying is that he will escalate and say that unless, for instance, European countries, you control your borders, I'm going to probably introduce a travel ban because I don't want people who aren't allowed to fly directly into the US fly indirectly via, let's say...
You're picking up at a very interesting point on that.
Europe.
And I think at the moment he's just sending this message out to those 12 countries and the others, and I think I've got them listed up there a little bit earlier. Maybe I've got these the right
Just do it with passports.
Yeah, so I'm just saying entry of immigrants and non-immigrants banned from 12 countries. So he's basically saying, look here, to the left in this country, I'm now having effective deportation and restriction policies in place. The clever point that I think picking out on that is he's learnt from 2017 and some of the court cases that are going through in America at the moment. Remember, they're challenging him on the individuals being deported to Venezuela. On this occasion, he said, we've done a complete security check. I sent out for a review. I got the security teams and national security teams to list areas of where we're concerned. And that's why he put them in a category, one after another. And he's also demanding that the courts, you said I've done this unilaterally. I haven't. I've addressed certain specific countries. And I've classed it as this, restricting the entry to protect the United States from foreign terrorists and other national security and public safety threats as well. And this is not me. This is an organization that's independent of me, done this review. So he's setting out very cleverly in executive order a number of changes. One, the courts, here are some reasons. Come on now, challenge me if you wish. To the left, challenge me over what I'm doing. It's a security issue. And to these countries, change your ways, and also, as you pointed out, I think some political pressure on it. So what I did is also, which I think is particularly clever, is pulled out from you what the White House has also said on this. So I'm going to see if this works. Rather than read through all of it, I just want to pick up, this is actually the restriction sheet that's been provided by the White House, so everybody can go online and have a look and see exactly what he's doing it. He's putting out the executive order. He's cleverly using the Supreme Court in Trump and Hawaii to say to the courts, here we go, we've got some legal precedent, because he knows. What do we know? Who's going to come next? It's the left, the liberals, the unions, the NCL, are all going to, or NCAL, who are all going to go to the courts and say, let's challenge him now for being wrong on this. It restricts the entry, so he's setting it out. Here's the national security issues at the bottom, securing our border and interests. He wants to get another great phrase in there, make America safe again. So I'm waiting for the massa hats. You know, don't want to say too much about massa, to be honest, because it might have repercussions back to the old cotton things. You know, so I'm sure someone's going to pick up on that.
They should lean into it.
Yeah, go straight in. So he's making it very clear, and here he's now also doing a special justification for each country as well. I think the problem with that is he's trying to protect himself from the court. So in Afghanistan, he says the Taliban controls Afghanistan and lets people just get out of the country. And this is where I think is a clever point from him. He could start using this against Europe by allowing people to say they're escaping Afghanistan to go into Europe, and then they want to come and travel to the United States.
I mean, there would be terrible repercussions on it, if not just economical ones.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't they just localize it and speak about passports? Rather than just saying on flat out travel ban from Europe to the US. This seems...
No, I don't think you can do that at the moment.
A bit ridiculous.
I think that would be difficult. So he goes all through the different countries, and I want to say Somalia, Sudan. He's got Sierra Leone in there, which is really interesting, because I met the Sierra Leone president, who's currently in there. Cleverly is a really good friend of his family are Sierra Leone based, so he goes over there fairly regularly. So I'm intrigued to see why Sierra Leone is on that list when it's supposed to be an ally of kind of Western Europe in the bulk against Russia and China, but he's put them on the list. And I think that comes to your political pressure point.
Yeah.
Listen, Sierra Leone, too many of you have been allowed to allow China in. For example, we had an American port that we wanted to have in the capital. You came in straight away, cancelled that port, and gave it over to the Chinese. Well, and the Chinese are now being able to build it. Well, to be fair, I read both the conditions. The Chinese were giving them a hell of a lot more roads, infrastructure through the country, from where all the assets and gold and materials that would come up to the port. So the Chinese are actually giving them for a lot less, a lot more. So if you were a pure business person, I could understand why Sierra Leone went in. But they are now being seen as too close to China. So I think Sierra Leone is well on that. Togo, similar sort of thing. They're falling within the kind of remit of Russia. So I think they're also being targeted for that. Turkmenistan, I found also slightly interesting, because that's one of the places that Tony Blair has been cultivating for quite a long time. And that's part of the long-term war against Russia. Turkmenistan is an important place for them. So I suspect this is about political pressure in there too. So what I've got here is, I'm going to try and go that. He's learned from that, because I think some of the White House issued a fact sheet. But one of the countries, if you look on there, who is not on it, on that list, when he talks about terrorism, I find it interesting, is this, Pakistan. He's not put Pakistan on the list, yet they're the biggest exporter of terrorism, some would say, that between them and Saudi Arabia, because a lot of people like those are involved in the big terrorist organizations. I think the danger of that is, if he did so, then he'd be capturing a lot of the people in Syria, who are all very nasty terrorists, who are now being lauded as leaders of a free country in Syria as they go off murdering
But didn't
Christians.
Trump also meet Giuliani, the leader of the Syrian interim government, and actually praised him?
Yeah, that's my point.
Yes.
So Syria very clearly has a huge number of nasty terrorists in there. They're carrying out terrorist actions on Christians throughout the country. But Macron's had him over, the Americans have had him over. And that's because basically the CIA helped fund them along with Turkey in order to get rid of the Russian supporters who were in charge. And now they're one of us. It doesn't matter what sort of level of terrorism you've done. But if we did go through Pakistan and you did ban Saudi Arabians, these people would also be suddenly caught within that net. There could be other reasons why Pakistan is not there, and maybe others can bring out the particular views of why are we not banning Pakistanis who are involved in that, particularly on the northern connections to Afghanistan. So politically, I think there is another game that's being played on that. Once more, might be down to the issue of more global politics and where they want to go. So obviously, we get the reactions. What do we think the reactions might be? Warmth? Generosity, kindness,
Screeching.
Oh, and the first one is happy to destroy the Middle East and rape its resources, but not so happy to take the refugees or those seeking a better life. Well, America is so fucked. Really? I'm not sure. I think the countries that they leave are pretty much that. But why should they have to accept people who are seeking a better life? That's the question. Do we have to? Do we have to take in refugees? Actually, you do because of the UN Refugee Convention. But the whole point about it is he's not turning around and taking refugees. He's making sure that these people are safe and secure first. So this is not a refugee issue. So the first one is you've been bombing the Middle East and others. You should take them. Your obvious response is if you bomb me, you should take the whole world in there because of all the wars that you've had. Then America would be pretty full.
If you're trying to exercise, I think basically empire goes with a kind of multiculturalism together, because if you try to exercise global influence, you will need allies, and you will sometimes pressure them, but also sometimes try to make concessions to them. And migration flows may be one such concession.
Well, I think that's what we've obviously adopted, but as we're seeing now with economics, cultural changes, terrorism, people are now beginning to have a different view, as we saw in Denmark, the lack of integration there, like the rising criminality. So countries now need to be able to look at whether they're globalized links with those nations and having some sort of connectivity with them, making them an ally. Do we necessarily have to bring in so many from that country? From one route or another, whether it's determined from students, whether it goes all the way to asylum seekers. Policies now need to be made in the interests of the people that live in your country. And I think America's making it very clear. Clearly, you've got another. My family's impacted. They can't come to the wedding. Obviously, to be fair, this is, he's saying it's nothing to do with anti-Semitism. No, it's about security. It's about a change in policy of the United States, and there will be some negative impacts. Maybe people can't come to the wedding, but I'm sure holiday and tourist visas. He's clearly saying, what country is Daniela from there? Is she Afghan? Is she from Yemen? I don't know. It doesn't traditionally seem to me like an Afghan name, Daniela, but maybe that's a pseudonym. I don't know. The third kind of category is, great, idea, you fascists. Clearly the fascist argument had to come out. You can't have anything from Trump without him being called a fascist. So I would be surprised not to see them. And of course, we won't be surprised to see a Democrat come out and do the same.
Democratic Congressman Dan Goldman of New York, and it's great to have you here, sir. I do want to ask you about the auto pen and what is happening here at the White House. But before that, the other executive action that President Trump took tonight, banning travel from these 12 nations, restricting it partially from 7 others. What is your reaction to that move from the White House tonight?
It's pretty consistent with what his quote-unquote immigration policy is, which is just essentially to keep anyone who's not white out of the country. And that's what he's trying to do with these mass deportations of people who are going through the asylum process, which is a lawful pathway. That's now what he's trying to do in targeting these specific countries. And so it's a combination of this effort to to push forward with this great replacement theory, as well as just to distract from what's really going on, which is a revolt against his terrible reconciliation bill that cuts taxes for.
Right, I'm going to come into that. So, sorry.
No, it's just irrelevant stuff here and there.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we come in, it's the great replacement theory, that doesn't kind of exist. And he's obviously racist because it's only about stopping black people from coming into the country. So it feeds into the narrative that and I think it's quite interesting. This is a nice little phrase. It's all the same BS they've spewed for the last 10 years. But if it's so great, why is the country it should be so brilliant. It should be lauding. It should be a wonderful nirvana if you've had so much immigration coming into that country. And then you've just touched on it there, just right at the end. Let's throw something else in. The reason he's done a travel ban is nothing to do about security. It's nothing to do about terrorism. And it's nothing to do about people throwing petrol bombs over Jews. No, it's about hiding the fact that the richest people in America can get a $270,000 tax cut. Well, I'm not even going to play this because it was just so banal when you listen to him. I think even the way just looking at the eyes and the face will tell you everything about this man and his ideology, that it's just he's trying to hide the bill that we talked about yesterday. And I think the level of nonsense on that. But it's not all bad news for people. I mean, here in India, across the globe, India fairly okay about it, blocking travel from several high-risk countries over terrorism concerns, visa abuse, and the lack of security cooperation. That's the Indian Hindustan Herald. And I thought to myself, okay, that seems pretty reasonable way of assessing that, because that's exactly what he's saying. I don't see an issue with it. Then we have DW News, Germans, though. The new travel ban targeting several Venezuelan interior minister, though. He goes crying. I thought I had the clip here. Unfortunately, it was really funny. It shows the video.
Is that not the clip? Right?
Oh, it is there. Yeah, this is the man. I think it's got a
whining, crying.
Yeah, here he is.
Para Estados Unidos. En verdad, estar en Estados Unidos es un gran riesgo para cualquier persona, no solo para los venezolanos.
He's
si
right.
usted es bien pajugo, vaya para Estados Unidos. Quienes gobiernan Estados Unidos es gente mala. Es el fascismo.
So, America, you've got to be stupid to go there. So why are so many Venezuelans escaping your country to go there?
I'm sure it's all.
A fair point. What he should do, if you don't want them going to a fascist country, then don't let them go to the fascist country. That makes the most sense to me. There you go. If you're so worried about the well-being of your people going to America, best recommend they don't go there.
But maybe their economy is so great, and it's fascist U.S. that creates this false propaganda that Venezuela has a problem with its economy.
Yeah, I mean, it is. I mean,
maybe
everybody I know that recently, some friends had to be, their plane developed some kind of problem as they're going across the Caribbean.
Speech impediment.
Yeah, and they had to land in Venezuela to have it repaired.
Oh dear.
And they had to spend a night in a hotel. And literally, they were guarded by police to the hotel and told not to leave the hotel in the morning. Because obviously, Venezuela is clearly a safe, culturally accepting place for people who are wealthy from other areas of the world, or deemed to be wealthy because they live in those other parts of the world.
It only makes the most sense.
Yeah. So otherwise, if it was such a place where there wasn't some form of fascism, which that is about, they would have been able to go around Venezuela in the evening. But I just like the people laughing. You're foolish, then go to the United States. And then we have this last one, which is, I just thought it was quite, I'll show this quick clip. This is Bannon, who he never fails to provide some sense of humour against Cuomo. I don't know if you say, is it Cuomo or
Cuomo?
It is Cuomo.
Yes.
With like a QU. Cuomo.
A little bit, yeah. Cuomo.
Yeah. Cuomo. Chris Cuomo. It almost could be like an advert. Chris Cuomo takes on.
He is just a very Italian-American looking fellow, isn't he?
Right, well, I'm going to have to listen because Stephen Bannon goes on this, and I thought just...
I'm glad you're a convert, but you're converting to one of MAGA's top priorities.
I'm no convert.
Just stop. I'm no
which
convert.
is stopping radical,
I'm no convert.
radical Islamist
Steve.
attacks. What you're seeing
Steve.
is a merger. Yeah, go
Steve,
ahead.
hold on a second. Hold on a
sir.
second, because this
Yes,
matters
sir.
to me too much. I lost too
Okay.
many of my friends and people on 9/11 for you to call me a convert, okay? I went over there and covered it in Iraq and Afghanistan and in Pakistan. I'm no freaking convert, okay?
Hold it.
What I'm telling you is,
Chris,
when I
hang on,
hear
hang on.
other domestic agenda issues being brought up as more pressing as a security threat than this, it bothers me. That's what I'm talking about. So I'm not a convert. I just want this to be converted to be a main concern, and it isn't right now. That's my point.
Certainly a convert. Where were you at CNN when we did the travel ban to make sure there was better screening coming from countries so that we didn't have radical jihadists come here? And President Trump took all the levels. I missed CNN and particularly your show having our back. In fact, I think you were going after us every night.
So, here we have people like Cuomo suddenly saying, I'm from CNN. I'm not a convert to the idea that terrorism exists and we should be stopping terrorism. But now we've got like guys coming out throwing petrol bombs at Jews, who like ourselves and my friends. I'm now actually quite happy to consider the idea of travel bans going all across to these Muslim nations. And I think it's a very valid point that two elements from this. First of all, are we actually genuinely getting Americans who are on the left and the CNN suddenly becoming converts to the idea that it's right to have travel bans? And is it only because now Jews are being attacked in their own homes or outside their own streets by people who have been failing to qualify on the rules of visas or overstaying? Is it because of that issue? Or is Bannon right in saying that, you've never really cared too much about it until it's really closely affecting you at home? Which goes on to a lot of the agenda we've been talking to. As people start to feel it closer and closer to themselves, suddenly they're becoming converted to the idea about it. And that goes to show the extent of mass immigration and the breakdown in society.
But also a kind of narcissism, because if you don't learn by the mistakes of others or by what happens to other people, there's a deficiency of sympathy, let's say it. And the left has turned sympathy into its flag, essentially, throughout the last 2 decades. They are the, within quotation marks, good people. Everyone else is a fascist monster. That's what they're trying to say. But if they constantly look at the facts of particular policies and they say, it's okay if it doesn't affect me personally, that's when their true colors are revealed.
What do we think about these people, though, when they're just doing that? I mean, do we really think that it's fair and acceptable that we just bring it down to ourselves and say, as long as I've got a nice house and a great job and I've been to one of those wonderful universities and protected myself for the last few years, that it's morally acceptable for me to ignore what's happening in the communities across the country? I don't see that as morally acceptable.
It's not, and you can see just the reaction that against Anna Kasparian when she said that she was assaulted by homeless people in, I think, California.
Yes,
I think yes, and
LA specifically, I'd imagine.
And
I don't know this particular story.
Yes, and she expressed dissatisfaction with the policies that lead to events of this sort, and everyone essentially turned their back on her from the left, and they said, you're destroying the narrative, you're a racist, you're a bad fascist.
Yes, Anna Kasparian, she was part of the. Do you know her? The Young Turks left-wing network.
Okay.
So for years she was, spewing all of the same progressive talking points until all of a sudden it began to affect her. At which point she began to separate herself from the left-wing narrative somewhat. But the interesting thing was, it was done in such a way that I think Stelios could probably agree with me here. Was the way that she was describing it was basically, yes, we knew that this sort of stuff was going on the whole time, but we just didn't really care, but now it's affecting me. Because there's no way that she didn't know that this sort of stuff was affecting other people.
It's also like now Jake Tapper went to a leftist podcast.
Oh, yeah.
And they were saying his son is a racist because he wants to become a cop. And he's 15 years old, and he was outraged by it.
Sorry, his son wants to become a what?
He wants to become a police officer.
Oh, cop. I thought you said cub. I thought. Wait, his son's a furry. Sorry, that was my fault. There.
I thought he was a particular baseball fan, but there we go. He's going to be one of the Cubs.
Yeah. Obviously, if you want to enforce law and order in your neighbourhood, then you're a raving lunatic racist, right?
Yeah, and I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, okay, we've got some of the usual reactions. We see that, and there's 4 different particular points. But the one thing that we do know that's happening in the United States, it's driving a massive agenda. This well-planned, well-structured Stephen Miller plan that was connected with others, that has effectively ended the border concerns in southern Mexico, and northern Mexico, southern United States. That crisis is over. He's now beginning to deal with the universities and the nasty left-wing ideology that's enabled them to be able to kill freedom of speech on there. He's dealing with the criminals and removing them. He's attacking the courts, and now he's got this particular order. And he's setting out a massive agenda, which I think is not only pushing the potential that you say that to Western countries, if you really want to have your visas, you've got to have a control on these people too, but also enabling people to see physically what happens when you have a proper immigration policy with deterrence, when it has a proper immigration with deportations, when it has a proper police force and a monitoring of a system to ensure that people who fall foul of the rules or break them also then start falling into the deportation and removal system. And how suddenly you're getting people across the globe going, maybe it's not right to go and try and cheat America and sneak in or bring in criminality or do crimes or terrorism. And that message is being sent out so that people in like Denmark are able to enforce their laws in a similar way, even though they're of a different political party.
If you would like to watch the full uncut version that is also uncensored, head on over to lotuseaters.com to find out more.